The morning her father sold her coffee shop to pay off his gambling debt, Tessa Wren thought the worst thing that could happen to her had already happened. She was wrong. She found out about the sale the way she found out about most things in her life. Too late, standing in her own kitchen, holding a legal document she hadn't signed, her name typed neatly at the bottom of a transfer agreement like she was a line item on someone else's budget. Her father sat across from her at the breakfast table, not looking at her, just staring at his coffee, the coffee she'd made, in the shop that was no longer hers. Dad. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. What is this? He didn't answer. The shop was called Groundwork. She'd opened it 6 years ago, after the divorce, after the miscarriage, after the year she'd spent barely getting out of bed. She'd poured what was left of herself into that place, the exposed brick walls she'd painted herself, the playlist she'd curated track by track, the regulars who came every morning and knew her daughter's name. Her 7-year-old, Petal, used to do her homework at the corner table every Tuesday, kicking her feet and eating the chocolate croissants Tessa made from scratch. She pressed her hand flat on the document. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Her father finally looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, from something else. I owe a man named Corvin Slate $400,000, he said, and he wanted the shop. Corvin Slate. She knew the name the way you know the name of a storm before it arrives. Everyone in Whitmore knew it. He owned half the buildings downtown, had a hand in every deal worth making, and people said his name in a certain way, low, careful, like they were afraid of what might happen if they said it too loud. You gave him my shop, she said. He would have taken other things. Her father's jaw tightened. Things I couldn't let him take. She thought about Petal. Still asleep upstairs, one sock on, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. 7 years old. Didn't know yet that the world could take things from you without asking. Tessa folded the document in half and set it down very carefully. Get out of my house, she said. Her father left. She sat at that table for a long time. Then she got her phone and called her lawyer. The meeting with Corvin Slate was supposed to last 20 minutes. He kept her waiting for 35. His office was on the 14th floor of a building she'd walked past 100 times without ever going in. The receptionist had offered her water twice. She'd declined twice. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, her coat still on, like she planned to leave at any moment. When he finally came out to get her himself, not the receptionist, him, she wasn't ready for how ordinary he looked. She didn't know what she'd expected. Something harder, maybe. Something that matched the name. Instead, Corvin Slate was in his mid-40s, dark-haired, wearing a charcoal suit and no tie. There was a scar along his jaw that looked old. His eyes were gray and very still, the kind of still that takes work to maintain. Mrs. Wren, he said, Mr. Slate. She stood. She didn't extend her hand. He noticed. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Come in. His office was clean. Unusually clean. No papers on the desk. No stacks of files. Nothing that suggested the amount of activity that should accompany a man with his reach. Just a wide window overlooking the city, and 2 chairs she didn't feel like sitting in. She sat anyway. I want to buy the shop back, she said before he could open his mouth. He looked at her steadily. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale. That's your worldview, isn't it? He tilted his head slightly. It's a worldview with a reasonable success rate. Name your price, Ems. Wren, Tessa, she said, because she refused to be surname only in a room with this man. And I'm serious. I have savings. I can get a business loan. I'm not walking out of here without a number. He studied her for a moment the way you study something that surprised you, not with hostility, just with attention. Then he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Your father owes me $400,000, he said. The shop appraised at $280. The difference was charged against a separate debt, one I have not yet decided how to collect. The air in the room felt different after that. What does that mean? It means the shop doesn't cover it. He said it simply, without cruelty. I took it because it was available, but I'm still owed. Tessa's chest tightened. She thought about Petal, the stuffed rabbit, the Tuesday croissants. How much more? 120,000. She didn't have that. She didn't have anything close to that. And he could see it on her face. because he was the kind of man who could read people's balance sheets and their expressions. "There's another option," he said. "No, you haven't heard it. I don't need to hear it." Tessa Wren. His voice was quiet, not warm, but not cold either, something in between that she couldn't name. "I'm not going to threaten you. I'm going to make you a business proposition. You can say no. I won't pursue your father's debt any further than I already have." She looked at him for a long moment. "Talk. I need a wife," he said. "Specifically, I need a wife for the next 18 months. There are reasons for this that I don't intend to share in full today. The arrangement would be legal, documented, and financially beneficial to you. The shop returned, debt cleared, and a sum on top of that you can use however you choose. At the end of 18 months, we divorce. Clean, no complications." The room was very quiet. "You're serious," she said. "I'm always serious. You want to buy a wife. I want a partner who understands the nature of a contract." He met her eyes. "That's not the same thing." She thought about every reasonable thing she should say. She thought about the word no, which was right there, easy, available. She thought about Petal, about groundwork, about the 6 years she'd spent building something from the rubble of everything else. "I have a daughter," she said. "She's 7. Whatever this is, she doesn't get touched by it." Something moved in his expression, the smallest adjustment, like a door shifting on its hinges. "Understood. I want the shop back before I sign anything. That can be arranged, and I want my own lawyer to review every document." "Of course." She stood up. He didn't move, just watched water with those gray, careful eyes. "I'll think about it," she said. "Take the week," he said. But no longer. She walked out without looking back. She made it all the way to the elevator, all the way down to the lobby, all the way out into the winter air before she stopped on the sidewalk and pressed her hand against the brick of the building and thought, "What is happening to my life?" She said yes on Thursday. She didn't tell her best friend, Marguerite, the full truth. She said she was dating someone, that it was complicated, that she'd explain when she could. Marguerite looked at her the way she always did when Tessa was clearly leaving something out, narrow-eyed and patient, like she was prepared to wait as long as necessary. "Is he at least kind to you?" Marguerite asked. Tessa thought about Corvin Slate's still gray eyes and the way he'd said, "I'm not going to threaten you," like that was supposed to be a selling point. "Define kind," she said. Marguerite made a sound that was not reassuring. The contract was 32 pages. Her lawyer, an extremely practical woman named Burdock, who had seen most things, read every page and came back with 3 amendments. Corvin accepted all 3 without negotiation, which Burdock said was either a good sign or the sign of a man who'd already gotten everything he wanted. Tessa chose not to dwell on that. On the morning of the courthouse wedding, she sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her reflection in the mirror on the closet door. She was wearing the nicest thing she owned, a slate gray dress that probably cost less than Corvin's cufflinks. She'd done her own hair. Her hands weren't shaking. She was proud of her hands not shaking. Petal appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her rabbit. "Mama, are you getting married today?" Tessa's throat tightened. She'd told her the bare minimum, that a friend of hers needed help, and this was a kind of helping, and it didn't change anything about them. Petal had listened with the serious expression she got when she was processing something, and then asked if she could still come to groundwork on Tuesdays. Tessa had said yes. "Come here, baby," she said. Petal climbed onto the bed and leaned against her. She smelled like sleep and the strawberry shampoo they used. "Will he be nice to us?" Tessa kissed the top of her head. "I put it in the contract." Petal considered this. "Okay," she said, which was more trust than Tessa had given herself. Corvin's house, she could not bring herself to call it home, was in a neighborhood that felt quiet in the particular way that money makes things quiet. The kind of quiet that means no one is near enough to hear anything. The house itself was large and pale and had too many windows, and the first time she walked through the front door with her 2 suitcases, she felt like she was trespassing. He showed her around in the way of a man who had never had to consider how rooms felt to someone new. The kitchen, the guest suite, Petal's room, the one he'd had prepared for Petal, which stopped Tessa cold when she saw it. There was a small bookshelf already filled, a desk with a reading lamp, a window seat with cushions. She turned and looked at him. "When did you do this?" Before the contract was signed, he said, like this was a normal thing. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said nothing. The first weeks were strange in the way of a shared space with a stranger. She woke up early. He was already gone. She made coffee. He drank it standing at the counter in a way that suggested he hadn't previously considered sitting down for breakfast. When she asked him if he'd eaten, he looked at her like she'd asked something in another language. "I eat," he said. "That's not what I asked." He paused. "Not always in the morning." She made him toast. He ate it, still standing, reading something on his phone. He didn't thank her, and she didn't expect him to. But he was there the next morning too, and the morning after that, and without either of them acknowledging it, breakfast became a thing they shared. Petal was cautious with him at first. She was cautious with most people, had been since the divorce, since the way her father's absence had rearranged her sense of who could be trusted. She watched Corvin from a distance for the first 2 weeks, evaluating. He was careful not to impose himself, which Tessa respected more than she wanted to. Then one evening, she found them in the kitchen. Petal had apparently decided to make hot chocolate, the stovetop kind, because Tessa had raised her to do it properly, and the pot had boiled too fast and there was milk on the range, and Petal's face was doing the thing it did when she was trying not to cry. Corvin was already cleaning the stove, not with impatience, just steadily, methodically, the way he did most things. He handed Petal a paper towel without comment. "It does that," he said. "You have to keep it lower than you think." Petal blinked. "How do you know?" "Same thing happened to me when I was learning." Tessa stood in the doorway and didn't announce herself. Petal leaned against the counter watching him, and then, in the small, tentative voice she used when she really meant something, "Can you show me again sometime?" He glanced at her. "Sure," he said. Tessa went back to her room before either of them saw her. She didn't mean to learn things about him. It happened anyway. She learned he slept 4 or 5 hours a night and considered this sufficient. She learned he had a younger brother he spoke to twice a week. Short calls that he took standing in the hallway like he was still deciding whether to sit down for them. She learned he had a scar on his left hand, below the thumb, that he didn't volunteer information about. She learned from his assistant Farron, an efficient, matter-of-fact woman who seemed mildly amused by everything, that Corvin had been in a business partnership that went badly wrong 3 years ago, that a man named Aldrich Prentice had taken something from him. "Not money," Farron said. "Something else." She didn't elaborate. Tessa didn't ask. She started having nights where she lay awake thinking about things she didn't want to be thinking about. The way he'd stocked Petal's bookshelf before the contract was even signed. The way he cleaned up spilled milk without saying a word about it. The way he looked at her sometimes, in the moments when he didn't know she was looking, not like she was a transaction. Like she was a fact of the world he was still determining how to account for. She was 34 years old, and she'd been alone for 3 years, and she knew the difference between feeling something real and constructing a feeling, because you were lonely and proximity was its own kind of warmth. She knew this. She reminded herself regularly. It didn't entirely help. The dinner was at Corvin's associate's house, a man named Hartwell Beaumont, which was exactly the kind of name Tessa had started to expect from the people in Corvin's orbit. The point of the dinner, as she understood it, was to present her as his wife to people who needed to see her as his wife. She was good at rooms like this. She'd grown up with a father who moved through social situations with one hand always open for an angle, and she'd learned early how to read them from the outside. She wore a black dress. Corvin's driver collected them at 7. In the car, Corvin looked at her the way he sometimes did, like he was revising something. "You don't have to talk about the shop," he said. "I know. If anyone pushes, you can say it's a family business." "I'm aware." He looked out the window. "You're better at this than I expected." "At what?" "Rooms like this." She looked at the side of his face. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He paused. "But yes, the dinner itself was fine. She talked to Hartwell's wife about her daughter, about the coffee shop, about nothing that mattered. She felt Corvin's eyes on her from across the table occasionally, not possessive, just present, like he was making sure she was okay. After dinner, on the back patio, a man named Birch Vellum came to stand beside her. He had the practiced ease of someone who'd been comfortable his whole life and believed this was a personality. "Corvin's wife," he said, not a greeting, more like he was testing a theory. "Tessa," she said, "how long have you known him?" She smiled in the way she'd perfected, warm enough to disarm, imprecise enough to reveal nothing. "Long enough." Birch Vellum looked at her a moment longer than was comfortable, then looked past her at something. His expression changed. She turned. Corvin was there, close enough that she hadn't heard him approach. He put his hand on the small of her back, the first time he'd touched her with anything like ease, and looked at Birch Vellum with the kind of calm that meant he'd heard the conversation. "Birch," he said. "Just the name, nothing else." Birch Vellum made a small, conceding gesture and moved away. In the car going home, she kept her eyes on the window and thought about the weight of his hand on her back, the way he hadn't made a scene, the way he'd just been there. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't need me to." "I know." She paused. "I'm thanking you anyway." A silence settled between them that was, somehow, not uncomfortable. She watched the city passing and thought, this is the part where I'm supposed to remember what this is. She remembered. She just didn't know if it was helping anymore. She found out about Aldrich Prentice on a Tuesday night. She'd come home from the shop late. Groundwork was hers again, returned as promised, and she'd stayed past close to fix a problem with the espresso machine herself, because she was the kind of person who couldn't leave something broken overnight. Corvin's lights were still on, which was unusual, and when she let herself in, she heard voices from his office. She wasn't eavesdropping. She was walking past. But she heard her own name, and she stopped. "She doesn't know," Corvin said. His voice was low, but she could make out the shape of it through the door. Another voice, on the phone, she realized. She's going to find out. These things always surface, not before the shareholder meeting. A pause. "Corvin, if Prentice goes public with the audit trail, he won't. Not yet. You're betting everything on a man you know to be vindictive." "I'm betting on the timing." His voice tightened slightly. "Prentice wants to watch me fail. He won't move until he thinks I'm close enough to the edge that I can't recover. That gives me a window. And your wife in all of this?" A silence that lasted long enough that Tessa's breath shortened. "She's not part of it," he said. She was never supposed to be part of it. She made herself move, down the hall, into the kitchen. She stood at the sink with the cold water running over her hands and thought about the 32 pages she'd signed. About the distinction between what the contract said and what the contract didn't say. She made tea. She took it to her room. She sat with it in the dark and did the thing she'd learned to do. The thing you learn to do when you've been blindsided before, which is to let the feeling move through you without immediately acting on it. To not text the first angry thing. To not make the call. She thought about everything she'd noticed in the past 3 months. The business trips that were slightly too frequent. The meetings that ran long. The way he answered some calls in the hallway and some in his office with the door closed. She'd registered it all without adding it up, because she hadn't wanted to add it up. She'd been fooling herself. Not about him. She still didn't know enough to know about him. About herself. About how she'd let herself start to feel something in a situation that was, at its foundation, designed for a purpose she hadn't been told. She didn't sleep much that night. She confronted him in the morning. She waited until Petal was at school, and then she found him in the kitchen. The kitchen that had, over the past months, quietly become the room where they were most honest with each other. And she put her cup down and said, "Tell me about Aldrich Prentice." He went still. "Tell me what this marriage was actually for," she said. "Not the parts I asked about in the contract, the parts you didn't tell me." He turned to face her. His expression was the one she'd seen the first day in his office, careful, contained. But there was something else in it now. Something that looked like the moment before you admit something you've been carrying for too long. "Sit down," he said. "I don't want to sit down." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, 3 years ago, I had a business partner, Prentice. He was responsible for managing a client fund, a large one. He falsified the reports, moved the money, and when the fund collapsed, he made sure the paper trail pointed to me. He said it evenly, like he'd rehearsed this version. I was investigated. I was cleared, but clearing someone doesn't undo the suspicion. Half the people in my industry still believe I was involved. She didn't say anything. I'm up for a board seat that would effectively end the question. Give me the standing to continue operating in the way I need to operate. He paused. The board includes 3 men who are conservative in a specific way: old money, family values, the kind of personal stability that reads as professional credibility. I needed a wife, she said, a wife. The silence between them was different from all the other silences. This one had weight to it. And the debt, she said. My father. Your father's debt was real. The shop was real. He met her eyes. I didn't manufacture a reason to involve you. I was looking for someone who... He stopped. Who what? Who could handle it, he said. Someone practical. Someone who had reasons of their own and wouldn't mistake the arrangement for something it wasn't. She laughed. Not a happy sound. Well, I nearly did. He went very still. Tessa, don't. She picked up her cup. Her hands were steady. She was proud of her hands being steady. I'm not angry that you used me for a business strategy. I signed a contract. I understood the terms. She turned toward the door. I'm angry that I thought I was starting to understand you. She went to work. She made coffee. She made croissants. She answered questions from regulars and smiled and said yes. She was fine, just tired, and she rebuilt her composure the way she always did. From the bottom up, quietly, without asking anyone to watch. Marguerite came in at noon, took one look at her. What happened? Nothing. Tessa, I found out that things are more complicated than I thought. Marguerite sat down and ordered a latte she didn't need. Is it fixable? Tessa thought about that, about whether fixable was the right frame. I don't know yet, she said. I don't know if I want to fix it or just finish it. He came to the shop that evening. He'd never done that before. She looked up from behind the counter, and he was just there, in the doorway, still in his coat from whatever his day had been, looking like he wasn't entirely sure what had made him walk in. The last customer had left. The sign said closed. She hadn't locked the door yet. She didn't say anything. She turned back to the machine and started cleaning it. He came to the counter, sat on a stool. He didn't speak for a long moment, which was very like him, and usually she found it tolerable. But tonight it made the air in the room feel thin. I should have told you, he said finally. She set down the cloth. You should have. I told myself it wasn't relevant to the terms of the contract. It wasn't. She turned to face him. But I wasn't operating purely on the terms of the contract. I don't think either of us was. She watched his face. Were we? He held her gaze. No, he said. Then that's the problem. He nodded slowly. I know. She leaned against the counter. The board meeting, when? 6 weeks? And Prentice? He's going to try to go public with the audit, discredit me before the vote. Can you stop him? I have something he doesn't know I have. His jaw tightened. A backup of the real records. My IT director preserved a mirrored copy the night Prentice rerouted the accounts. I've had it for 2 years and I was waiting for the right moment. Why didn't you use it sooner? Because using it ends the question entirely. And ending the question entirely also ends my reason to watch him. He paused. He did this to other people too. I wanted enough time to document the pattern. She stared at him. You've been building a case? Yes. For 2 years. Yes. She thought about the man who had cleaned up spilled milk in her kitchen without comment, who had stocked a bookshelf for a child he didn't know yet, who slept 4 hours a night and ate toast, standing up like comfort, was a concept he'd never quite gotten around to learning. You're furious, she said. Not a question. He looked at her steadily. I've been furious for 3 years, and you haven't burned his whole life down. Not yet. Why not? Because that's not the kind of person I want to be. He said it simply without drama, and that was what undid her a little, the simplicity of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, if I stay, she stopped, started again. If I stay past the board meeting, past the 18 months, I want the truth to be the thing we work from, not a contract minimum, not what's relevant to the terms. He looked at her like he was doing what he always did, revising something, recalculating. All right, he said. All right, she repeated. That's it? What else would I say? Most people would argue. I know what it means that you're still here talking to me, he said. I'm not going to argue with that. She picked up the cloth again, started cleaning the machine again. You can have a cup of coffee while I close up. He sat on the stool and she made it, the good kind. The kind she made when she wanted something to come out right. She handed it to him across the counter, and their fingers touched and neither of them moved for a moment. Thank you, he said. He wasn't talking about the coffee. She let go of the cup. Don't make me sorry I stayed. I'll do my best, he said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't the kind of thing you could promise. But she looked at him sitting in her shop, in the place she'd rebuilt herself piece by piece, and she thought, maybe what you need from someone isn't the guarantee. Maybe what you need is the person who tells you the true thing, even when the true thing isn't simple, and then stays to work it out. She turned off the lights one by one. He waited. Outside, it was cold and clear, and when they walked to the car, she didn't move away from the warmth of him beside her, and he didn't pretend not to notice. She thought about Petal, asleep at home with her rabbit, about the Tuesday croissants and the stovetop hot chocolate, and all the small things that had become, without her planning it, a life. She thought, I didn't sign a contract for this. This is something different. And then she stopped thinking about it and just walked.